The world is actually doing it very beautifully, and that's the main reason why they've come at the top on the Switch Survection survey. Of course, you switch your plastics and again napkins to actually eco-friendly. They're made of natural materials. They do not cause rashes. They are softer in nature. This is a very good switch, especially for teenage girls. No, it's not completely black box. Like if you come and visit our sites, you would know what's happening. We are nutrient mining from biodegradable waste and converting that into liquid biofertilizer. Bioreactors are optimized in such a way that it creates a microclimate for the larva to actually process and break down the waste much quicker than they would in the natural environment.
One person's trash is another's treasure. We would have all heard this in the past, but today's guest decided to change the world with it. All of us produce a ton of waste every day at our homes. Vegetable peels, food waste, expired bread. And most, if not all, of it reaches a landfill where it decays out in the open. Imagine a world where we can use this trash to build treasure. That's exactly what Ankita of BillionCarbon did. She built a machine that uses a fly larva to decompose waste into fertilizer. Fertilizer that then helps in growing our food again organically without the use of any chemical fertilizers. Hop on and enjoy today's conversation as we deep dive into Ankita's journey. I would love to know more about your background, about your experience with BillionCarbon and your journey prior.
So I'm a computer science engineer by qualification, and then after graduation, I worked with a consulting firm, went on to do an MBA from London Business School, came back to India, joined a multinational company, multinational startup at that time. Eventually quit my job. This was early 2020, I think, and then started researching on climate as an industry, sustainability as an industry, and where we are right now and where we need to be as a society, and what's the gap that needs to be filled. I think very similar to what you did, Jaspreet, in terms of gap analysis and then, what should we do? So we were doing a lot of research at that time in terms of across industries, across, you can say, energy, across waste, across human health, in fact. So, and we found there are certain gaps that really need to be filled. And with all that research, we actually started creating programs, which were like 2 to 3 month long programs for individuals, which would help people move to a more sustainable lifestyle for that particular topic of interest. So, being techies, we also built an app for it. We called it Nature Healers. And we were running 3 programs at that time. One was sustainable menstruation, one was plastics, and the third one was composting. And we were also doing a lot of impact analysis, that from what program are we able to create, how much impact. And it was very clear that if we are to make impact at scale and massive impact, then the biodegradable waste part, that is the most untreated and the untapped space that we should actually try and double down on. So that's how we started looking more at what are the biodegradable waste treatment practices across the world. We looked at around 105 variations of bio-waste treatment that is prevalent across the world, based on climatic conditions, based on input parameters like are they using agri-waste, are they using household waste, etc. Are they using fruit waste? Based on whether people are using a shredder, not using a shredder. And we narrowed it down to 3 or 4, and then we narrowed it down to the one solution that we are now using, that we wanted to double down on, that we knew that if we put more research into this, then we would be able to make this into a scalable business, which can also have impact at a massive scale. And that's how BillionCarbon was born. So, yeah.
Nice. Taking a step back, I think Nature Healers, I happened to check it on the internet. So you had multiple cohorts and programs where people could, you mentioned one of them was better menstruation tools and
sustainable menstruation. Yeah. Period paradise, as we call it.
How much
And this is something that I feel remains a challenge across such initiatives. What kind of receptibility did you get from people at large? Did you find people getting aligned to the thought process, getting feeling a little more welcoming towards this new initiative? What was your experience like that?
So everybody was very supportive. Not everybody wanted to make the change immediately. So what we saw was that every person who came on board on an average required around 4 to 5 touch points across 4 to 5 months. And then they would become comfortable to even trying to change the way they manage their periods. So of course, a person like me would be like all gung-ho. They would just require one touch point. But then some people would require much more than 4 to 5 as well. Some people never came on board. And that's fine, because this is actually such an under talked about and underdone, I would say, thing. And it's so easy to change. It's really so easy to change, because right now what most women and menstruators use in India, it's either nothing in the rural areas, and 60 to 70% of the population of the menstruating population actually use nothing. Most menstruators in India use disposable plastic sanitary napkins, which is bad for your health. It's bad for the environment, because you get a lot of infections, a lot of rashes, because as soon as the blood comes out and it comes onto the sanitary pad, it starts to oxygenate, which basically means it starts to rot. So it starts to smell as well. So, and especially when it comes in contact with the gel and the chemicals of the pad, that makes it worse. There are 3 very, very easy solutions. Easiest one is, of course, you switch your plastic sanitary napkins to actually eco-friendly sanitary napkins, eco pads as we call it. And because they're made of natural materials, they do not cause rashes. They are softer in nature. This is a very good switch, especially for teenage girls. Because for teenage girls, it is usually difficult to change the mindset just that quickly, right? Then the second option that we give is cloth pads. Cloth pads are slightly difficult to adopt because it requires more maintenance. However, this is something that works really well for many, many women who are able to create that environment around them. So the thing is that cloth pads now have become so convenient that they've become leak proof, and they're machine washable. And the third one, of course, which I myself use, is the menstrual cup, which is the best innovation so far when it comes to managing your periods, because it's comfortable. You won't even feel like you are actually on your period, except, of course, the cramps on the first and the second day. You can play sports, you can go swimming. It simply just gives you the feeling of you forget you're on your period. Even when I myself switched, the first feeling I got was, why did I waste 15 years of my life not using the menstrual cup?
Right. I love the fact that these biopads are now more easily accessible through NGOs, through whatever mechanisms in the rural area. Because I think that at a larger scale also pushes the decentralized distribution problem, because we've spoken to Sameer from Rain Matter on a similar front. So where he also had this perspective that centralized manufacturing in itself is a large cause of climate change issue that we are facing, because when you have a centralized manufacturing, you have centralized distribution, you get all the resources to one point versus distributed, because a rural area, a village is fully able to take care of majority of their needs. So why have one single factory in one remote location pushing out to the entire country? So I'm glad that this is happening.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
Speaking of BillionCarbon, so I was able to find on the internet that you're building biofertilizers. You're building, and that's a byproduct of the waste management process that you've developed, the fertilizer that comes out. So if you could elaborate on where do you get your material from, how does it get processed? I believe there's a black box solution that's called BillionCarbon that takes care of all of this. So how does that work?
No, it's not completely black box. Like if you come and visit our sites, you would know what's happening. But yeah, we have not done a very good job at putting things on our website. We are a very lean team right now, but yeah. So overall, what we do is we are nutrient mining from biodegradable waste and converting that into a liquid biofertilizer. So in terms of the entire process, it's quite simple. We source the waste from one of our organizations or partners or whoever we are working with, and we set up a waste processing site within carbon bio-waste nutrient mining plants, as we call it, BDNM plants, right where we're able to get the waste. So these could be small sites like 2 ton per day processing, 5 ton per day processing, or we could go beyond that as well. And then what happens is we process it using the BillionCarbon bioreactors, which we have designed very specifically over the last 2 years of research and development. So it has gone through multiple iterations. And what we do is we use the black soldier fly larva. The bioreactors are optimized in such a way that it creates a microclimate for the larva to actually process and break down the waste much quicker than they would in the natural environment. And that helps us actually process the entire waste within 3 days or 1 day if we are using a shredder as well. Now, this entire process, it creates a liquid biofertilizer, which is currently undergoing field trials, and we are working to optimize both of our products, which is the bioreactors, optimizing them well, even better for efficiency, and the liquid biofertilizer to see how we can enhance its properties after it is generated, and so that it is more beneficial to the crops that we are working on and working with for the field trials.
But if you give me a visualization of what the reactor looks like, is it a concrete structure that's contained? Because I believe you would be controlling the environment inside the reactor to a certain degree. So, or is it a stainless steel infra where you put the raw material and put the culture and hence facilitated the reaction? How does it look like?
Yeah, so currently we are going low cost. In India, it's actually very difficult to scale if you start making things which are immovable or which require a lot of capex upfront. So with that process, what we've done is we've designed a low-cost bioreactor which uses HDPE and parts of other kinds of materials like fiberglass, etc. And inside it has a lot of layers, which is actually, we've applied for a patent for the entire process. And then that's what in its entirety creates the microclimate, and we control it. In fact, we are now starting a project for implementing and embedding IoT devices within our bioreactors so that we are able to control the microclimate better and make the efficiency even better than it is right now.
I think that's a very, very interesting space to be in. I remember
it is,
back in 2019, 2020 during COVID, I got fascinated with growing mushrooms at home. So
wow.
And that's where I realized how beautiful the domain of handling bacteria, yeast, cultures is. I mean, you're able to...
Have you heard of Nuvedo?
I have.
Nuvedo. They're building an entire business out of how can we get people to grow mushrooms at home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they're based out of Bangalore and very good friends of mine. And so they'll send you these kits, which you can keep at your home. You can start the culture and they'll keep growing the mushrooms and you'll get a very good harvest out of it. So you can actually because the mushrooms are actually, they have a very less shelf life. So you can directly harvest it just when you're about to cook and eat the fresh mushrooms out of it. So yeah, do check them out.
Nice. Coming back to the bio-waste plant. So what is your source of material? Because you mentioned that you try to put these plants closer to the supply itself.
Yes. Yeah.
So is it farm-based? Is it industrial
waste
that's biodegradable?
Currently we are not doing farm-based. Multiple customer segments we're targeting right now. Major ones are corporates, industries, and to some extent municipalities as well. So corporates and industries, they have a lot of waste that's being generated at the site itself. So it becomes easier for us to actually procure the waste and reduce the carbon footprint of the transport of the waste as well. So that helps a lot. Again, similarly, municipalities have a similar setup. The entire municipal waste of the city is actually already being transported to a particular site. So we can just procure the waste that we need from them at the site and process it over there itself.
Right. I believe UP now has a waste segregation policy, which means that most of the collection agencies would keep the waste. They will collect it at source segregated. I mean, they would be biodegradable and they would be non-biodegradable. I'm not very sure what happens after the segregated waste is picked up from folks in Noida or UP in general. I don't know if it's going to different dump yards, but how do you segregate? Because
I would not comment on Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh still has a long, long way to go. But I can give you the example of Indore. Because Indore is actually doing it very beautifully, and that's the main reason why they've come at the top on the Swachh Sarvekshan survey over the last 4 to 5 years, I guess. And they have taken a long time to reach this stage. They didn't start at the top. They actually started quite a bit at the lower levels, where other cities were doing a much better job than Indore is doing right now. And what they do is there is collection and segregation at the source, which means that as a household, you need to be segregating your waste into separate bins. Majorly, your wet waste needs to be separate and dry recyclable waste needs to be separate. Now, some municipalities within Indore might have implemented a further segregation as well, like, you have to put glass separately or e-waste separately as well, but that's not the usual practice. Now, what they do is they've actually gamified it, and it's very interesting to see because they have an article in the newspaper every month stating which wards were the worst and which wards were the best at segregation and collection. So every ward is actually incentivized not to have their name in the worst list. And then they incentivize their households by either penalizing or actually producing or implementing better policies of making sure that people are actually segregating. So Bangalore also does this very well in terms of getting people to segregate. And in many apartments, many societies, there is a charge, a substantial financial monetary penalty that is levied on a household if they're not giving segregated waste out to the waste picker. And that actually turns out to be a good deterrent for most people, if not all, to be able to segregate it at source. And once you start doing it, it becomes habit, basically.
Right.
After this, once it is picked up on these waste picking trucks. And what happens is, so these are the trucks which now have these very, they play this song which is now very recognizable in most communities, I would say.
Correct.
The Swachhata Mission song. And you just know that they're coming. Yeah. So they pick it up. And I think Indore is also working on enabling these with GPS so that the contractors follow the certain route and spend the time to actually collect and segregate it. There's one more thing that they do to incentivize people segregating at source. It is if the waste picker sees that your waste is not segregated, they will actually empty it in front of your house, segregate it in front of you, and then take it. So it is actually quite humiliating within the society, right? कि तुम्हारे घर के आगे कचरा ऐसे डाल के and वो कर रहे हैं because you didn't do your job. It's like that.
Right.
So these different kinds of things they keep trying. Now, from the small trucks, it is taken to the ward level where it goes through another round of segregation, usually for the dry recyclable waste. And then from there, it is again loaded back into trucks and taken to different places based on where the particular waste needs to end up. So, for example, for Indore, the biodegradable waste currently goes to a bio-CNG plant. The recyclable waste, depending on what kind of recyclable material it is, it is either sent to a recycling factory, I suppose, or it is sent to the centralized dump site where it is picked up by the recyclers. There is also around, I think, 10% to 20% of inert waste. Now, inert waste is something that we really cannot do anything about at this point of time. It could be something like construction demolition waste, or it could be other things, small plastics that really cannot be segregated, or MLPs which cannot be recycled. So they have to eventually go either into the landfill or they end up into the waste to energy plant, which basically is a very inefficient way to recover the energy from any kind of waste. But yeah, that's what happens. This is a good model. Of course, they're working on many more improvements in this as well. And this is, I would say, the ideal way that all Indian cities can do it right now.
You mentioned waste to energy plant. How does that work? The inefficient bit.
Yeah, the inefficient bit, all it does is it puts it into a burner and burns it and converts that into electricity or any other kind of heat energy, or depending on whatever the waste to energy plant is doing or contracted to do for that. And it's very inefficient because you're able to recover only so much of the energy from any particular source, right? So yeah, by burning it. Yeah.
Understood. So
yeah,
I'm actually surprised that this is happening in Bangalore and Indore, because I did not know. I mean, I felt that there was some segregation that's happening, but I did not know that. I mean, there's actual processing happening.
Indore is actually, I would say, still number one. And they have produced a lot of reports, like detailed reports of how they do it. 100-page reports, in fact, as a part of their Swachh Sarvekshan survey. So they'll give you exactly the statistics of how much waste they collect from which ward, where does it go, what was the segregation, or what were the different kinds of waste categories within the waste that they collected, everything. So it's quite good. Bangalore, I don't know if they have reached that stage, but I think they are quite in the, at least some wards are doing a really good job at segregation and collection. Yeah.
So now I think I broadly understand how the system works. So you have figured out where to find the right waste products from, and you've tried to do it at places where you get it at scale segregated mostly.
Yes. Yeah.
Once this segregated biodegradable waste comes to you, it goes into your solution, which again has a combination of larva and hopefully bacteria in the future that breaks it down into biofertilizers. These biofertilizers would have the nutrients or would have the properties that would make the soil more it'll help soil in producing better crops or having the better quality of soil itself.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting. So what will it take to scale this up from where it is today to across the country? Because I mean, it's clearly a solution that sounds really good, has very little negative consequences, which is rare. I mean, most things that you would do come at a cost. Even if it's not monetary, it's carbon cost. So this seems to have very little carbon costs. As a matter of fact, offsetting the cost of transport of material from one point to another by having at source conversion into biofertilizers.
That's right. Yeah. So there are quite a few challenges that we are actually working on right now, both in terms of both of our products. One is how do we make our bioreactors better, and the other is finishing our research on the biofertilizer so that we are able to find the product market fit. Now, once we have that, then it's going to be much easier to actually replicate the entire solution that we are creating. Now, that replication can happen in many ways. It can either be us doing it, or it can be a franchising model. But that's something that we'll figure out probably 2025 once we are ready with everything. And why I say 2025 is because testing fertilizers on crops takes its own agricultural cycles. And it is very difficult to get any farmer to buy your fertilizer, which is in the market, if you do not have at least 2 to 3 agricultural seasons of data to back yourself up.
You've mentioned in one of the articles that I read about you the status of venture capital in climate change, climate tech per se in India, wherein I think the context was that there's a lot of discussion and hence investments in solar, wind, but it's majorly being limited to that. Solar, wind plus the ecosystem. There are very few investments outside of the two energy classes. So what's your perspective on that? If you could elaborate, what needs to be done differently?
Yeah, so I think I gave a lot of thought when I actually wrote the article, and it's quite easy to see the pattern over there. And what you see is that so VC money or any institutional money is basically growth money. When an institutional investor invests in a business, they are actually looking for 4x, 5x, if not 10x growth over the time that they are invested in, which basically means that they want the business to grow. And that is only possible once the business has covered the research chasm, as we call it, which is they've completed the research, they have a full-grown product, they have a full-grown and tested business model. That's most important, because there are a lot of products that don't have good business models. Menstrual cup, like we just said, right? And once that is established, then that particular industry or the product is mature enough for institutional investment to get attracted towards it.
Yeah, I think for your industry, the scalability is there. Someone's waste is someone's gold, and all of us produce waste every day in our lives.
Yeah.
So I think once there's maturity in the solution itself, and once I think you have a couple of POCs going on, raising venture capital shouldn't be a problem for an industry like yours, because it's a global problem.
That's right.
Everyone produces
so
waste.
I would say raising funds wouldn't be a problem, whether that's going to be venture capital funds or some other kind of funds. That's something that time will tell. Even right now, we have a lot of help from some philanthropic money from government schemes, etc., that are actually helping us in our research.
And it's good that a lot of Indian VCs funds are also coming in here, because if I take a couple of examples, Sameer's team at Rain Matter Foundation, they've been doing a lot of philanthropic initiatives. And,
I'm personally a big fan of Sameer and Rain Matter. Yeah.
I think the entire bunch. Kailash from Zerodha, extremely smart.
Yeah.
Loved listening to his podcast. Sameer, really nice to listen to and talk to. Similarly, Thea Ventures, Priya Shah's team is doing something in this space, and that's really appreciable.
Yeah.
So a lot of good people are now coming into the industry, and their intent and hearts are at the right place.
Yes.
I was speaking to someone from our industry, and I come from solar. So the way they are building their own businesses, they see it as an NBFC. Mm-hmm. They don't even see it as a technology company. They don't see it as an instrument of climate change or climate tech. Mm-hmm. They see it as an NBFC. Mm-hmm. We build a power plant, we maintain it for 10, 12 years, we break even on our investments, and then the next 10 years we get consistent returns from it.
Yeah, so the problem with that is that it's not scalable, because it's very difficult to find players who might want to take that up as a business, or entrepreneurs who might want to take it up as a business. And any industry goes through an innovation phase in its business model specifically only when there are multiple entrepreneurs racking their heads around it, around experimentation with business models. What exact iteration of the business model will actually work in this industry? And that's not possible if you have just linear returns,
Great, Ankita. I think this was a really nice conversation. So thanks for joining in today.
Same here, yes.
As we wrap up today's episode, remember, small actions lead to big change. Our choices today compound to define the world's future. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, please share it with a like-minded friend. Also, please consider leaving a comment, as that really helps other listeners to find the podcast. See you in the next episode. Till then, choose cleaner, choose better.